Hello and welcome to Medic in the Making UK. I'm your host. In this podcast, we discuss all things related to medical school, getting into medical school, advice, support, and so much more. In this particular episode, I'm going to be discussing how I got all 9's at GCSE and how you can implement strategies and techniques to help you do that to then maximise your chance of getting into medical school. Specifically in this episode, I'm going to be focusing on GCSE science, so GCSE chemistry, biology, and physics. Now, one of the questions that I get asked really often actually in my personal life and online as well is, what subjects do I need to be studying for GCSE to get into medicine? Now, the subjects that you need are maths, English, and then your sciences. So most schools will actually make you that it's mandatory to do English and maths. And for example, my school offered English language and English literature, and we had to do both. And most schools will make you do both. In terms of English language, that is, you have to have that, it's mandatory. And English literature is the one that it's a little bit more in the grey area, because a lot of medical schools, some medical schools will ask for it, some medical schools won't. But obviously that is dependent on your school and your circumstances and things like that. But if you are wondering whether your medical school requires English literature, then that is something to go online and search. The medical schools that you're interested in, do they require English literature? But most of the time, it's not something that you have to worry about, because the high school will naturally just offer that to you, and it's something that you have to do as part of your course. Now, moving on to the science aspect, so there's two types of qualifications that you can get for science. So you can get your triple science, which is where you do biology, chemistry, and physics. So you do that, and you get 3 separate GCSEs, and then there's your combined science, where you also do biology, chemistry, and physics. You learn all 3, but actually the content is slightly reduced, and you will get a combined sort of qualification, and you get 2 grades rather than 3 grades. In terms of medical school, a lot of medical schools will accept combined science. It's not that they won't accept it, but sometimes then the requirement, the grade requirement, will be a little bit higher, because you've done combined science and you've got 1 less qualification, so then they expect a higher grade. Some medical schools, they really prefer and they emphasise they would like to have a triple science student. So if you are going into medicine, really try and make sure that you are comfortable in your science, that you're doing as best as you possibly can to achieve those top grades, so that you can sort of go down the triple science, triple qualification route, because it just means that you're putting yourself in the best position possible. So now getting into the actual aspect of how I got 9's at GCSE in my sciences. I think the first point, and where it all started really, was that I started taking my sciences quite seriously, not because I felt like I had to, but because I actually really enjoyed the subject. And I remember, I think in the summer of year 9, so we technically start our GCSE course in year 10, but in the summer of year 9, which was quite early, I had these textbooks, which I'll mention later on, but I had these really, really amazing textbooks, and I went through them and I'd read through them, and I started to read the course and the syllabus, and really starting to understand the beginning topics and the core topics. And I actually had a goal. I remember I wanted to get through all of more than half of the books before I started year 10. I remember that was my goal, and unfortunately I don't think I finished completely, because I did go away on holiday. But actually I did that because I thought, this is an absolute requirement, this is an absolute must, and it turned out that it wasn't like my teachers weren't expecting that of any of us at all. But I was just somebody who was very enthusiastic, and I was very passionate and eager. And I think that if you are, very passionate about science, about, going into healthcare, at that time I wasn't even necessarily thinking about medicine, but I was just focusing on the subject and I really enjoyed it. So I think one of the ways to think long term, think of the bigger picture. Don't just get to the end of year 10, get to the end of year 11, then start cramming, because then you're not giving yourself enough time to understand. You're not giving yourself enough time to feel confident. You're feeling really rushed and really panicked. So start as early as you possibly can, because it means that you can go, at your own pace. You can go slower. You can understand the content. You can enjoy it as well. And you give yourself more time to build on that, then to do lots and lots and lots of practice questions. So that's, I think, that's the foundation. That's where you start from. And then moving on to the actual learning of the content and the knowledge. I personally didn't take notes. I've never taken notes throughout sort of my GCSEs and A-levels, it's not something that I necessarily agree with, because I think that it takes so much time, and when you're writing the notes and you're transcribing and you're collating all of those things, you're just passively writing it down. You're not actively absorbing, understanding, processing any of that information. You're just writing it down, and you're in that process where you're not really thinking with your brain, you're just doing. And I think it's very, very time consuming, because I think for my A-levels, there was only one topic that I attempted to write notes for in the very beginning, and it didn't bring me any extra benefit. It took me a lot of time. It wasn't something that I needed to do. Now, you might be thinking, well, my school doesn't provide us with notes. My high school didn't provide me with notes either, but for GCSE, the textbooks that I used were absolutely amazing. And those were the textbooks that I genuinely think that I managed to, in the end, they played a massive role in me being able to get the grades that I wanted. Because I felt like they had a lot of they had basically all the knowledge and information and content that I needed to know. I used the CGP textbooks. I'll try and leave a link below, and they were the ones that they had the questions and the notes. I didn't particularly use the questions because I found the questions were sort of quite easy, but I used the notes, and I think alongside what you should always be doing is alongside the notes is always checking the specification, because it means that you're not missing anything, because you're going through a textbook, but you need to make sure that as you're going through the textbook, have your specification side by side, be ticking and checking and making sure that as you're going through that actually, okay, I've just done that part of the spec, I've just done that part of the spec, to make sure that you're continually hitting those points and you're staying on track. So that's really important in terms of the knowledge. And the way that I did this is that I would do it very often, so very repeatedly, little and often, and I would read, first of all, the knowledge. So if it was, let's say, cells, I would open up the page, I would read through it, I would make sure I understand it, and I'm actually digesting and processing the information. I know what the author is talking about. And then after that, I would close the book and I would say it out loud. I would read it out loud as if I'm teaching a class, if there's an imaginary class I'm teaching them. And at this time, I did not know anything about, active recall. And right now, active recall, you might have heard it's a buzzword. It's a really, really hot topic right now in sort of education. But I didn't know at the time that this is active recall. And looking back, I realised, the reason that actually worked is because I now realise that there is scientific backing behind that. And whether you want to write it down on a piece of paper, whether you want to actively recall it on a whiteboard, or say it out loud like I did, it's totally your choice. But make sure that you are actively retrieving that information without looking inside the book. And then once I'd said it out loud, as if I taught a class, I'd open up the book again, I'd look inside and see, okay, what have I missed? What did I forget? And what did I say wrong? And then I'd make a little, I'd make a little mental note of that, or I'd write it down, put a little star next to it in pencil. It's your choice. And then make sure that next time when you're again doing that sort of active recall process, have you then the thing that you got wrong or the thing that you forgot, are you remembering that the second, third time round? And I think the key to this is actually, you're not parrot learning here, you're not machine learning, you're not trying to memorize word by word what's written in the textbook. That's not what's going on here, because the only reason it was so effective is because I actually understood the processes, I understood the biology or the chemistry or the physics behind it. With physics, it took me a little bit longer because I found that a bit harder. But I eventually I understood how the mechanism worked, how the science worked. It wasn't just me reading off the page and trying to memorize, a script, because if that's the way you're approaching it, that's not going to work. So make sure that you understand. If you don't understand, I would recommend, going onto YouTube. And there's lots and lots of different YouTube videos out there, lots of different YouTubers. Again, I can put some links in the description. Or, talk to a friend who knows more than you, or approach your teacher. So make sure that you're taking the time to realise, okay, what is being said here. Now, once I'd understood all that information, and I'd sort of been through that process, then I'd put that into action by doing lots and lots of different past papers. Now, we used to have very sort of often periodic, we used to have testing, we used to have these little mini assessments, and to prepare for that, I would, there's loads and loads of resources online, so physics and maths tutors, I think Access Tuition as well. There are so many websites online that you can get, like MME, so Maths Made Easy. There are so many websites online that have lots and lots of questions by topic. So when you have those mini topic tests, you can go through and you can find the questions by topic. So you can, for example, if you're being just tested on I don't know, you're being tested on photosynthesis in biology, then you can go and just find the questions on photosynthesis. So that's really helpful. And I would do those questions, and then once I had done those practice questions, I would go through and I would mark it using the mark scheme. And the more that you do this, you realise that there are actually certain key words that the mark scheme, particularly in biology, with the specific mark schemes, there are specific key words that you might have got the general gist, the idea down, but then actually, because you've not used that key word and your knowledge is correct, and teachers would often say to us as a class, like, we know that what you're saying is right, but you've not got this key word, this key phrase down. And that's sort of where you sort of converting your knowledge into getting those actual marks. So the only way that you can get familiarised with those keywords, with those phrases, with the wording, is by doing so many practice papers and marking yourself so that you can realise and pick up on what the examiners are looking for. So you're sort of stepping into the shoes of the examiner, looking at your paper through the lens of the examiner. So that's really, really important. And then sort of moving on towards your mocks, and then sort of towards your actual GCSEs, towards the end, start doing actual like practice papers, so full papers. And again, full papers are online on many, many different websites. You can find them on Maths Made Easy, you can find them on Physics and Maths Tutor. The entire paper is on there, and do it sort of slowly. At the beginning, you might not do it in times conditions, but as time goes on, do it in time conditions, so you know how much time you have left. You're not panicking, in the real thing, thinking, I've not got enough time. I'm used to doing it in untimed conditions. Make sure that you're, again, as you're getting closer to your GCSEs, as you're getting closer to your exams, to your mocks, try and mimic the conditions of the exam. So, don't have loads of snacks nearby, just have a bottle of water, make sure there's no noise, shut yourself in your room, so there's no TV, background music, podcast, whatever, playing in the background, and you're just focusing on your paper, so you're sort of replicating the environment of the exam, and that really helps you in your real exam, because then you're not sort of depending on external factors and these comfort, like your snacks or whatever. So that's really, really important. And once I had done all of these practice papers, again with these full-time practice papers, it's really important again to go through and to mark them, and particularly with these practice papers with a longer sort of long answer questions in biology and chemistry and physics. It's important to realise, actually, what I used to do is if I got some things wrong, I would make a sheet, like a document on Word, and I would copy and paste, the question and then the mark scheme, and I would see, again, it's not about necessarily learning it off by heart, it's actually seeing what you got wrong, or you can, some people, they like to rip out the actual page that that they've got wrong, and they write it in red, the correct answers. I personally didn't like doing that, because it meant that the sheets were separate from the paper and it wasn't inside the paper. But do it however you want, so on a Word document, on an Excel spreadsheet, taking out the physical paper, but make sure then once you've got those mistakes, you're regularly reviewing those mistakes, looking through that Word document or wherever you've stored those answers, and seeing, okay, I went wrong here. So it means that if you come across a similar question, you're able to pick up on your mistake and you're not making that mistake again. And in the future, again, if you're coming onto new questions, you're able to see, actually, this is where I went wrong in the past, and transferring those skills to make sure that then you don't make those mistakes again. So that is it for today. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, any suggestions that you'd like for future videos, please don't hesitate to get in touch on my Gmail, medicinthemakinguk@gmail.com. I hope that this episode has been really beneficial to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.